I don't know what that, everybody knows me. It means I'm starting to have been around a long time, I guess, and getting old. I don't know what that means, but it is true. Or it means that the Finnish community is extremely small. It's one of the two, right? Or maybe a combination. But thanks for that nice introduction. It's really nice to see everybody here too. So I am going to go ahead and I'll just say a little bit about just myself. I've been teaching at the, Christine already did, but I'll say a little bit more. I've been teaching at the University of Minnesota since 2002. If you don't know, if you happen to not know who I am. I spent the last 2 years teaching at the UIT, which is called UIT in English, the Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø, which is at 69 degrees latitude. And just a couple days ago, actually right around now, they entered their 2-month period where the sun does not rise above the horizon, and it rises again on January 20th. So, and I experienced that for 2 different years. I was there for 2 years. So I experienced that period where you go for 2 months with no sun, and it's quite extraordinary. The sun kind of comes up to the horizon underneath, and you get this glow for a few hours every day, but you never actually see the sun. And the day that the sun comes back is called Soldagen, Sunday, not Sunday, but Sunday. And the day everyone celebrates at work, everyone has coffee and these rolls, and it's a big celebration because the sun is back. And people go up on the top of buildings and they look to see the sun because you can see it very far away in the southern sky. It's quite dramatic. So anyway, but I have been working with Finnish for a long time. I was an exchange student in Finland in high school back in 1980-81, a long time ago, when I was 16 years old. And that's really, I kind of got the spark for Finnish from my family. I'm Finnish on both my mom and dad's side. My mom's mom was Finnish, and both of my dad's parents were Finnish. And my dad's parents spoke Finnish all the time. So I grew up hearing Finnish all the time, but not speaking it. And so I was a little irritated, and honestly, by that. And so I decided to apply to be an exchange student. And fortunately, I was accepted and went there. And that kind of changed my life in so many ways. And is kind of, if it wasn't for that year, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, and we wouldn't be here. So I'm really grateful to the Rotary International Exchange Program for giving me that opportunity. It's the best exchange program because there are no program fees. So it allowed someone like me to be able to go, actually, whereas the other programs wouldn't have. So, and I should explain a little bit about my name, because people maybe are wondering, why do you have a new name? Didn't you have a good Finnish name? And why did you swap out one Finnish name for another Finnish name? So I should explain a little bit about that. It's not really so common for people to change their names at this point in life unless you get married. And no, I did not get married, so don't think that. I wouldn't change my name for another person anyway. I would only change my name for me, which is why I did. So my new name, Haataja, is my great-grandfather's original name that he had, my father's father's father, before he left Finland. And before he left Finland, actually, he was living on his mother's home farm. And her maiden name was Karvonen, and that's why he took that name when he came to the United States. And I have nothing against having a maternal name, on the contrary, but I've always just really been drawn to the name Haataja. And in Finland, it's more of an uncommon name, and it's really strongly associated with that area. And so when I found this out when I was 16, I thought, oh, someday I'm going to take it. And I thought, well, this is the year to do it. So because 2020 is such a strange year, so I might as well just change my name, coming back. So that's my little story about that. But I will go ahead and share my screen here with you and tell you a little bit about the Kven. The Kven or the Kvens, depending on how you want to say it, who are, so can everybody see my screen here? Is that good? Yes? Okay. So I call it a field report because I just spent 2 years at the university, UIT, the Arctic University of Norway, and it's the only place in the world where you can study Kven, and it's the only place in Norway where you can actually study Finnish. I'll mention that in a minute. So if you don't know much about the Kven, not a lot of people do. In Norway, people do, because they are a people that are a local people in Norway. But even in Finland, not everybody knows about the Kven. People are starting to know more. But the Kven live in this area, and I'll kind of explain the history of the Kven in a second. But the Kven live in this area of Northern Norway, which is when you go just north in Finland, just keep driving. If you can find a road that goes across, there are a few. And you get to this northern part of Norway, and this is the area which in Norwegian, they have this term, which is really important. It's called the Trestammersmøte, which is the meeting of the three tribes. And you can probably guess what the three tribes are. They're the Norwegians, it's the Finns, and the Sami. And this is a really important concept to keep in mind when you're thinking about this area, because, you know, nowadays we think of these real national borders that, you know, Norway is Norwegian, you know, they're Norwegians, and Finns are Finns, and Swedes are Swedes. But of course, even in countries that, you know, like the Nordic countries, where there aren't a lot of minorities, there are certainly minorities, and there always have been. And they have always been multilingual places also, and multi-ethnic. So this is not a new concept. This is a really old concept. And this term they use a lot in the northern part of Norway to talk about this. It's a very current sort of term that they're talking about. So the area that I was in, this map is in Finnish, if you're wondering. So that's why all the names are in Finnish. So Suomi, Finland, Norja, Norway, Ruotsi, Sweden, Venäjä, Russia. And you can see over here, Tromsø lääni, which is the Tromsø, the county. And then we have Finnmarkin lääni, which in Finnish, which is Finnmark county. Just as of this year, these two counties have merged into one big county called Troms og Finnmark. And that's been very controversial because the people who live in Finnmark, which is the eastern part here, they have a very, very strong sense of local identity. And the people that live in Troms, which is just this kind of smaller area here, right around Tromsø, Tromsø is right over here. It's on an island. It's a much smaller place, and the Tromsø people were pretty neutral about the merger, but the Finnmark people were really against it. And however it went through, and you know, so if you think that we only Americans have controversy, they have controversy in Norway too. So if it's any consolation, their people have disagreements there about you know, mergers and things like that. So this area, if you can see, there are these different kind of this lighter green. I wish they had made a little bit better contrast on this map, but I really like this map. So if you can see sort of here in the west, you can see this lighter area of green, which where I'm kind of with my cursor here. So Ykea, which is in Norwegian, Lyngen, or Raisi, Nureisa, Navuono, Kvänangen. This is one area where the Kven people historically lived. And then another one here is near Porsanger, Porsanki in Finnish, or Kven. And then Tana, Teno over here, and then Sørvaranger, Etelavaranki, and then this area around Vesisari or Vadsø in Norwegian. So these kind of this lighter green areas are the areas where the Kven have lived. And who are the Kven? This is the big question. Well, the Kven, or the Kvens, depending on how you want to pluralize it, with an S or not, they are basically descendants of people who moved from the northern areas of Finland and Sweden over the last several hundred years. So northern Finland and northern Sweden, as we know, have experienced, they're kind of difficult places to live. Nature is very harsh, and there isn't a lot. The growing season is pretty short, and so when famine hits, it's really pretty catastrophic. And there have been a lot of famines in the northern parts of Finland and Sweden over the years. And during these times, people would travel, would sometimes go just temporarily to work in northern Norway, and then some people went and never came back. Similarly to the way that Finns and Swedes came to the United States with the intention of returning but never did. And so what we mean by Kvens are people who are descendants of those people who left northern Finland and northern Sweden. They were Finnish speaking originally, and then they settled in these kind of lighter green areas. And so their descendants are called Kven, and the language that they speak is also called Kven. So I'll talk about that in a minute a little bit more. But that's basically, you can kind of see the migration. And why did they go there? Well, they went there because there's a lot of fish in Norway. You can see that Finland has no coastline anymore. It had a small Arctic coastline that was taken away by the Soviet Union after World War II. Sweden also doesn't have a coastline up in the north. Norway has that complete area. It goes all the way. You know, a great trivia question is, yes, Norway does share a border, a very short border with Russia over here in the east. But that area is very rich in fish. It's also, the climate is actually quite mild. It's you know, people always say, oh, you lived in Tromsø, you lived at 69 degrees, you know, latitude, north latitude, and Minneapolis is 45. Wasn't it really cold there? And I thought, no, it's a lot warmer than Minneapolis in the winter. So in the winter, the typical sort of, it never really below maybe 10 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, below sub-zero would be kind of crazy. And, but in the summer, it's not very warm. It's, you know, maybe 50s, 60s, 70s is a really warm day up there. So it's a real, and I'm talking about the coastal areas. The coastal areas of Norway are quite mild. They're really temperate because of the sea. Whereas inland, it can get quite cold in the winter, very, very cold. But that made those areas kind of easier to live in. And also people settled a lot along the coast. And the Finns that moved there, then they were engaged often in fishing. And, you know, there's a lot of fish there. So it was kind of you know, like migration nowadays, when you compare migration back, you know, historical migration and present day migration, it's very similar in so many ways. The parallels are amazing, right? A lot of people did it for economic reasons, right? For a better life, right? To feed their family, right? And to have better opportunities for their children. So that's kind of, I just want to familiarize everyone with this area, what we're talking about. And you can see here that all of these places in Northern Norway where the Finns, eventually being called the Kven, settled have Finnish or Kven names. So all these places have both a Norwegian name and a Kven name, which is really interesting. I'll talk about that more in a minute. So by the way, I don't mind it if people interrupt me. If you have a question and you want to ask it while I'm talking, that's totally fine with me. I'm totally used to that. So feel free to do that if you'd like to. So Kven, we should talk about this name. So in Kven, then there are three different terms that they use to refer to themselves. So a beloved child has many names. In Finnish, this is a little phrase, rakkaalla lapsella on monta nimeä. So kväni is one way of, probably the most common way of talking about the Kven. Kainulainen is another one. And if you know anything about Finland, this might confuse you because you may have heard of the area of Kainu, which is kind of in the northeast, south of Kuusamo, which is where part of my family is from. But that is, there's a whole explanation for that. It's not directly related to that area. Kainu was a term that was used more for the area in the boundary area of Sweden and Finland there. And then lantalainen is another word. So there are these three different terms that are kind of going around. Kväni is probably the most popular one. Those are in Kven. Then in Norwegian, then we call a person Kven, or in Northern Norwegian dialect, Kven. So that KVEN is pronounced Kven. That's just the Northern Norwegian dialect, which is what I speak now. And then, or Kvensk is the adjective. So that's also the name of the language. A person is we'd say, han är Kven, but han snackar Kvensk. So he or she speaks Kvensk. Those terms, Kven people don't all agree on what to call themselves, either in Kven or in Norwegian. So they are, if we kind of go back to this area, I'll say a couple of things here. The eastern or the western portion over here by Tromsø, in Tromsø, that area was settled kind of first by the people moving from northern Finland and northern Sweden. And so there's been settlement there. The Finnish-speaking or Kven-speaking settlement has been there for quite a long time. Whereas in the eastern part here, near the Russian border, it's much more recent. And so the identification, the people's relationship to the word Kven is different and is actually changing all the time. It's a shifting sort of thing. So some of the people who are in the eastern part, near Vadsø, Vesisaari, over there, they prefer to call themselves finsk ättet, or of Finnish descent, or norsk finsk, Norwegian Finnish. So, you know, people, if you belong to a particular group, you can decide how you want to be called. So it's kind of a complicated issue in terms of how people want to identify. Some people feel like the term Kven is pejorative. Some people feel like they just don't identify it. So there's been a change, though, I would say, over the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years, of more and more people accepting that, okay, yes, we are Kven. We used to call ourselves Norsk Finsk now, but we're really Kven. So there is this real movement and this reawakening in this identification with Kven. And you can see here on the slide that this is the new Kven flag, not new, but it's been around for a little while. This is the new Kven flag, and that's the Norwegian flag. So A little bit of terminology there. I will just continue to use the word Kven in English. That's the word that we use in English. We only use one, fortunately, so I don't have to keep going between different words. But if you look into this in Finnish or Norwegian, you will find different terms, and it can be pretty interesting. So here's just a, an example of a Kven family here. So this is a little postcard from 1931 from Kamaivar, and it says here, the text here says, Krikan sammu kalarannassa poikineen. So sammu krikka at the, like fishing shore. I don't know how you'd translate that, basically doing fishing work related to fishing with his sons. So it's kind of an idea of sort of the environment that they lived in, very mountainous, right? And, a lot of wooden structures like that. And then, people engaged in fishing. Gives you an idea of sort of what the occupations they were doing. So, so that historical area was settled, and prior to 1850, really, people would just speak their own language at home, and the government was really not very involved in people's lives in terms of, it was in terms of taxation, but it wasn't in terms of, you need to speak Norwegian now, or you need to change your name. Starting in the 1850s, especially through the 1950s, so for a period of about 100 years, is what we call the period of Norwegianization. And that period, really, the Norwegian government started taking an interest in this area and started to really, there were so many people that were speaking Finnish or Kven that they decided, we need to kind of do something about this, and we need to kind of make these people more Norwegian. And if you think of things that have happened in the United States, the parallels are just right there, right, with Native Americans. The difference is that the Native Americans were here before any Europeans came here. But of course, the Europeans made the Native Americans, tried to make the Native Americans American, and there's no one more American than the Native American, of course. But those same kinds of processes happened in Norway, and they were quite harsh. So you needed a Norwegian surname that was required for land ownership. And this is really interesting because when you see, there are a lot of people that are Kven, but you would never be able to tell by their name, because what happened was their ancestor at some point just changed their name to a Norwegian name, and then totally to blend into the regular, the rest of the Norwegian population. And people, I just reclaimed my name, but I didn't have a non-Finnish name. I just switched a Finnish one for a Finnish one. But in recent years, some Kven people have started to take their original Finnish name back, and some of the names have also been changed. They were Finnish, but they were Norwegianized. So one great example that I was just reading about was a man with the name of Harjo, Harjo, which in Finnish was Harju. And it was actually written the Norwegian way, because O in Norwegian is pronounced U. So his ancestor had Norwegianized it, or somebody had Norwegianized it by adding an O. And he was now, I was reading an article about him trying to get his name back. And in Norway, you can't, for me, it was quite easy to change my name. I just, paid my fee, did the court hearing, which was via Zoom, like everything nowadays. And, the judge didn't even require an explanation for why I was changing my name. She just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing it for any reasons to try to avoid any obligations. But in Norway, to change your name, to take your Finnish name back, if there are other people that live in the country that have that name, and it's under a certain number, I can't remember the number, under 50 or something like that, you have to ask all those people if it's okay if you can take the name that they have. So it is not an easy thing for these people who lost their names, or their names were changed just with, the stroke of a pen. To get them back is not always an easy thing. It's the name laws in the Nordic countries are much, much stricter than they are in the United States. So another thing is that Norwegian citizenship then was required. So because people, the immigrants to Northern Norway, they wouldn't necessarily, become citizens automatically. They were just living there, and people weren't so concerned with becoming a citizen. The national borders and the association with nations that we have nowadays, those borders are so important these days. They weren't quite as important. It was more your local sort of association than it was that big national association. You didn't have TV, you didn't have radio. you know, there were maybe newspapers, but not everyone, you know, would read them. It was just, you know, and if you have been to Northern Norway and you flew there, for example, from Oslo, you know that it's a very, very long way away from Oslo. So Tromsø, where I was, which is not even the farthest away, it's only because there is a lot of Norway that still goes to the east of there. It's a 2-hour plane ride, and it's like a 22-hour car ride to get there through Sweden, because that's the shortest way. So this is not something you just don't decide, we're going to go to Oslo for the weekend. Well, you could, but you're going to fly. You are not going to drive. Nobody, I never heard of anybody driving from Tromsø to Oslo unless they were moving. That's the only time they would do it. Everybody flies. So, so this Norwegian citizenship was required, and then once the Norwegian citizenship was required, then knowledge of Norwegian was required. So then they forced people, basically, if you want to be a Norwegian citizen, which you need to basically to own land, then you have to learn Norwegian. So they basically, it was the beginning of kind of the, well, I won't say the end, but it was the beginning of the slow decay in the use of Kven, right? This sort of forcing people to change and not allowing people to speak Kven in, you know, in the schools and various places. So 1936, Norway had this school law which forbade the use of Finnish as a helping language in schools. Up to that point, it had been allowed. After that point, it was not allowed. So the kids would, you know, start school at the age of 6, whatever, and, you know, go to school, not speak Norwegian, and they couldn't even speak Norwegian. They couldn't even use it as a helping language, right? So that's familiar to a lot of Finnish Americans. My dad was that way when he went to school. He didn't know any English, and, you know, his teacher just started speaking English, and he just learned. But it wasn't. It wasn't. I'm not aware of the laws in Minnesota at the time, but in Norway, there's actually a law that said you can't even use it, Finnish, as a helping language. So the result of this is that when you start telling people your language is bad, your name should be changed, you know, some people start believing it themselves, right? So some people think, yeah, let's change our name. Let's not speak Finnish or Kven anymore. Let's just become Norwegian. And so the most successful policies like this are the ones where you get the people to buy into it themselves, right? Because then they just make it happen. Because once you stop speaking the language to your children, it's gone in 1 second. Anybody that speaks another language, sometimes my students will ask me, you know, my younger students, and they, you know, some of them have boyfriends, girlfriends, or, you know, married sometimes, and they say, oh, you know, you know, we're expecting kids, or we're going to have kids, and we're wondering what we should do in terms of the language. And I say, oh my gosh, you know, if they're bilingual, if one of them is Finnish and one of them isn't, I said, you have to speak Finnish to your kids. That is just not even a choice, because that is the biggest gift you can give a child, is the gift of another language, and, you know, their identity, right? It's part of their identity. Because if you don't do that, it is so much work to learn it later, whereas it's nothing to just speak your native language to your kid. So by the result of this policy was that by the 1960s, many families had switched their home language to Norwegian completely during this time. So the parents, you know, even though they would maybe, you know, had always spoken Kven or, you know, Finnish, depending on what you want to call it. I'll always say kind of Kven or Finnish because it depends on the family what they called it. They would start speaking, you know, can you imagine at home just starting to speak a different language at home, and then you switch over to Norwegian, and what you end up with is you have families that where the older children were born in the 1950s and they grew up speaking Kven or Finnish, and then the younger kids who were brought up in who were born in the 1960s were not brought up with the language and can only understand it passively. So right there within, you would see splits within single families where you could see, like, there was one certain kid, there was a break in the kids, you know, if you had a bunch of kids, you could see, boom, that was the line where mom and dad stopped speaking Kven to the kids. So, I mean, it was a really successful policy, and it happened over a really long time, and it ended up with a lot of people assimilating. And so nowadays, it's a really big question, I'll talk about it in a minute, but it's a really big question, is how many people have Kven or Finnish ancestry in Northern Norway? And boy, it's a really great question. There are some estimates out there, which I'll give you, but it's a really difficult question to answer. I mean, if you walk down the street in Tromsø and you took a DNA test of everybody walking down the street, you would find a lot of people that are, you know, Norwegian and Sami, Norwegian and Kven, or all three, you know, any kind of a combination. It is really, it may seem like a really homogenous place, but it really isn't. There has been this, you know, the Sami were there first, the Norwegians, and then the Finns. So you have this kind of this meeting of these three groups of people. Okay, so speaking of the Sami, then there are some real parallels, of course, with the Sami. And then there's some important differences. So the Sami, of course, had the same, you know, were subject to the same types of policies of Norwegian. So Norwegianization didn't apply only to the Kven, it applied to the Sami also, right? The Sami, in a sense, did better because, you know, some of the Sami were nomadic, and so they were less subject to the assimilation or less likely to assimilate as strongly as the Kven, who were, you know, more settled and, you know, living in permanent dwellings. So so there was maybe less assimilation there. And then, of course, the Sami got really active politically at an important time when the language was still very vibrant. So this really happened sort of post 1960, is that there was this real Sami awakening, whereas there wasn't a Kven awakening at that time. The Sami started realizing, you know, hey, this is our land, this is our culture, and this is our language, and we're gonna, you know, we're gonna fight for it. And if you probably heard of the Alta conflict, which occurred in the 1970s and 80s, it was a dam that was going to be built, and it was going to flood a whole town. And the Sami decided to get politically active. So you see in this in these photos here on the left, these this is in Oslo, and it says in Norwegian "Vi sultestreker," which is "we are hunger striking." So the Sami were hunger striking in Oslo. And then here's the picture on the right. The very first thing in Norwegian says "Vi kom først." You can probably guess what that means. We came first. And then behind that, you kind of can't see the first word, but it says "Vi flytter ikke," we are not moving. So the Sami, the political awakening of the Sami, kind of the cultural and linguistic awakening of the Sami, sort of the realization that not only are they a political force, but they have their culture and their language to preserve at the same time. All of that kind of happened at a really, really critical time when Sami was still really vibrant. There was no similar political thing that happened for the Kven. So during this time, Kven just kept continuing to kind of go downhill in terms of its use in daily life, unfortunately. So the Kven language, and I will say that Kven is a language, but if you talk to people, and I say that after having been in Norway for 2 years, having worked at the university and having talked to a lot of people and having worked in my department and in my unit within the department where we were responsible for Kven and Finnish for the whole country, basically the academic aspect of it. And the question is Kven a language or a dialect? And the question of language versus dialect is not at all an easy question to answer. So you might think, well, oh, it's obvious, you know, that this is a language versus a dialect. Well, we don't really have anything that is close enough to English to compare with. We have a lot of dialects of English, but we have no language that is close enough to English that we might almost think it's a dialect. Everything that's, all we have are just dialects within English. But if you think about Norwegian and Swedish, if you know people that are Norwegian and Swedish, and if a Norwegian person meets a Swede, they will just speak their own languages to each other, and they have very few problems understanding each other. It really isn't much of a problem. When I was in Norway on Norwegian TV, if you have a Swedish person speaking, they will just have interviews where they won't have any, they might put the subtitles sometimes, but they'll just have the Swedish person speaking to the Norwegian person directly. They don't need an interpreter or anything. So, but very few people would say, oh, those are two different dialects, because really the criterion that's often used is mutual intelligibility, which means that if speakers of two language varieties can understand each other, then it's the same language. But that isn't the case. That is true about Norwegian and Swedish, but we don't call them different dialects. And the reason that we don't call them different dialects, we call them different languages, is that each language variety is associated with a particular country and has its own spelling system and its own culture and traditions associated with it. So really, again, it's the people that speak that variety that get to make the decision about whether it's a language or a dialect. It's not the outsiders. That's none of their business, really. The people that it's theirs, they can decide, and for their own reasons. And so just like the Swedes and the Norwegians say that those two languages are distinct, then the Kven have said it's that their language variety is a language. And so it's based on Northern Finnish dialects, and dialects that were spoken in Northern Sweden, Finnish dialects that were spoken there. And so if you speak Finnish and you hear Kven being spoken, or you look at written Kven, you would think, oh, I understand a lot about this. It sounds like Northern Finnish dialect. Well, to a large extent, but then you will start running into words here and there that you do not understand at all. And those words would be words that come from Norwegian as well as from Sami. So that really gives Kven its distinct character, is that because it was isolated from the rest of Finnish, right? It took in words from Norwegian, it took in words from Sami that were relevant for the local culture, right? Those words made more sense to use than the original Finnish words, or they were new concepts that people encountered when they came to the area. Then that started to give Kven its local flavor. Also, a really important thing is that since the Kven were geographically separated from the rest of the Finnish-speaking population, right, in Norway, then although there was interchange in terms of, there were books that people would read and people would write letters to their relatives, that type of thing, there were all kinds of changes that were going on in the Finnish language. In the 1800s, there were all kinds of changes that were going on in terms of standardizing Finnish and deciding that Finnish is going to be written this way, and deciding that this is sort of like, people would decide, Finnish was originally not a standard language, not one language, it was a bunch of dialects. And written Finnish is an artificial construct which was created from these different dialects, and it was a really deliberate decision by a bunch of different people to create a standard language that was written a certain way and had certain words that were used to refer to certain things. People still in Finland speak their own dialects, but everyone knows what the standard is, because that's the standard that's used in writing most of the time, and that's the standard that you hear the news delivered in, for example. But all of those processes that occurred in Finland did not occur in Kven. So all those changes that occurred in standard Finnish in the 1800s, which were a lot, didn't happen. So Kven started to sound like something really different for those reasons also. So for example, if you would meet like my great-grandparents, for example, the Finnish that they spoke had a lot more Swedish in it than the Finnish that is spoken nowadays. So the Finnish spoken nowadays actually has a lot of English in it. But in the 1800s, they took out a lot of the Swedish words and replaced them with Finnish words. And those Finnish words, those changes never occurred in Kven. So there are a lot of really good reasons why we should consider Kven a different language. And of course, it's associated with a different country, right? And there's a different culture. There are different traditions that developed in that environment. Similar to Finnish, American Finnish, which developed from the Finnish that was brought over from Finland by the American Finns living in North America, right? That Finnish did not stay the same. People always say, well, it was fossilized, because sometimes Finns will say, oh, I met this 95-year-old person who spoke American Finnish, and it's so quaint, and it sounds like my great-grandmother did from the country. Well, that's because they're only thinking about a few things about that language that are really salient. There were many other changes that occurred in American Finnish that they're not paying attention to. And there were a lot of words that came from English into American Finnish. You've heard people say like, peti pakki and peti ruuma, things like that. Those were sort of ilmalaiva for airplane. Those are things that just developed, and there's nothing good or bad about them. Those are just simply choices that were made and the way that people started to use words. So anyway, so Kven up until 1998 kind of had there wasn't a lot of visibility in terms of being Kven and the Kven population in Norway in 1998 is not very long ago, right? It's only 22 years ago. But in 1998, finally, then the Kvens were recognized in Norway as a national minority. And then in 2005, just only 15 years ago, Kven was recognized as a national minority language. And it's the importance of that is cannot be overstated, because once the government recognized Kven as a minority language, then suddenly one big thing happened after that, and that is money started being poured into Kven. And that is really, really important when you are talking about a language that is not spoken by very many people, has been the subject of all of this terrible Norwegianization policy. And now the Norwegian government, after all these years of, it's of course different people, but it's the same country and the same government now is doing exactly the opposite. It used to, be involved in Norwegianization. Now the government is involved in Kvenization, or whatever that word would be. That's been really big for Kven. And you can see here on the page, I have a few images here. So in the middle is Kven's grammatik, which is a Kven grammar that was just written in the 2000s. That's by Eira Söderholm, who was one of the people who did a lot of work for the Kven in Norway. And she's a professor emerita now, but she visited us quite a bit. She lives in Finland now, but she visited us. I got a chance to meet her quite a bit over the last 2 years when I was there. So she created a whole grammar that kind of codified all the different varieties of Kven and sort of the variation that exists. It's quite an accomplishment. It's quite a thick book. And then on the right, you can see the first novel ever written in Kven. And this was just also in the 2000s by Alf Nielsen Borskog, Kuosuvaran Takana. And if you look at that and you speak Finnish, you think, oh, it looks just like Finnish. And if you would open the book, and start looking at pages, you would see, passages of several words. You'd be like, this is just like Finnish. And then suddenly it would not be Finnish. And then suddenly it would be Finnish. And then suddenly it wouldn't be Finnish. That's what it would look like to you. You could read it. But there would be things that would be confusing, and you would not understand everything. I kind of think about it. It's maybe like listening to a really maybe country version of Scottish English, where we Americans sometimes have to kind of strain our ears, and we hear words here and there that we just kind of skip over. You hear a word, and you're like, I don't know what that means, but I get the gist of the conversation. It's a little bit like that comparison, but it's maybe even a little farther, but that's sort of how it is. And then on the lower left there's just an example of the United Nations. It's the Human Rights Declaration. So it's just an example of written Kven and what it looks like. And it's really interesting. If you know Finnish, then you see, oh, this looks like Finnish. Maailman ihmisoikeus, but then it's deklarationi. And of course, that deklarationi is directly taken from Norwegian. So it looks like a mixture of Finnish and Norwegian. It's just Kven. I mean, just like English is a mixture of English and French and Latin, right? It's just a new variety. But there has been a lot of work in terms of trying to get things written in Kven. Now that they have a standard writing system, an orthography that you can use, then now there's a Kven newspaper, Rujankaiku, which publishes articles in Kven and in Norwegian. There is even a little bit of Kven radio. So there has been a lot of sort of action going on in the cultural sphere. So a little bit about the Kven language, just where I was. This is a picture of the university, UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. I always have to say it's not the University of Tromsø. It used to be called that, but now it's UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. UiT stands for Universitet i Tromsø, which is the university in Tromsø, but we never say that out. We say UiT. And if you go to Tromsø, it'll just be called UiT, UiT, they say in Norwegian. But Kven has been taught there since 2006, so just only for the last 14 years. And we offer a BA and an MA. So it's the only place in the world where you can study Kven at the university level, and you can get not only a BA, but you can get an MA. And then 2007, the written language was standardized. So an obvious question people might ask is, oh, so are there a lot of people studying Kven and Finnish? And my answer would be no, there are not. There's not a lot of people studying Finnish at the University of Minnesota either, But you might think that there would be more in Tromsø, because this is the local area where the Kvens were. There, you know, it's. I would say that there's, and I'll talk about this in a second. There is a lot of activity in the cultural sphere. A lot. There is interest in the language, but I think people, I don't know, I'm not sure. It's a lot of work. Anybody that is like people that have been former students of mine, they know how much work it is to learn a language. It is an enormous task that is never ending, right? You don't just study for a year and you're fluent and you can speak it, right? It's a big thing. So we did not have a lot of students in the Kven program. There were times when there was 1 student in the course, 2 students in the course. I mean, the numbers have even been that small. This year they have a few more. My colleagues there tell me, because during the pandemic, more people decided to go study at university because the job situation isn't so great there either. So they had kind of an uptick this year. But the 2 years that I was there, the enrollment was actually quite low. But there's a lot of interest, and our dean at this is a picture of the campus. Over on the lower left here, you can see this really tall tree. My office was kind of right behind that. That was, I don't know which of those, but one of those on the third floor there was my office. And this is called Labyrinth, the labyrinth, where people like the students congregate. And out here you can see, it's kind of a fuzzy picture, but there's the sea over there, and then there's the mainland beyond. Tromsø is on an island. So really, the Kven language is sort of like the university is the center for academically. But that said, there are language centers that are in different places in Northern Norway, and these various language centers like Vadsø, for example, Kvænangen, these are places where there are local areas which are really right in the areas where the Kven settled, and they conduct language courses too there. So there are definitely language courses there, and there are people interested in them. The enrollments aren't huge, but there definitely is interest, and the government is really interested in supporting it. One of the problems is that, so students in primary and secondary school, they have the right to take Finnish or Kven in Northern Norway if they're in certain parts of the country. The problem is it's pretty easy to find Finnish teachers, because there's a country right next door which has 5.5 million Finnish speakers, and a lot of really good, as we know, Finnish teachers are really well trained, right? So there are a lot of really good, like all my TAs that I've had over the years, they're all super well trained teachers. I mean, Finnish has just amazing teacher training. So there are definitely Finnish people that are interested in teaching, but it's really hard to find people that can teach Kven, that are trained in teaching Kven. So the university has been really involved recently in trying to get students who are getting a degree in education to add Kven to their program, so that when they graduate, and if they're going to stay in Northern Norway, that they can also teach Kven as a subject. So this has been a big move. My department, which is the Department of Language and Culture, was very interested in this, and our entire sort of college, or our institute, or sort of faculty, what they call facultet, which is our larger unit within the university, which is the humanities. Our dean is actually Kven, and she was really keen on getting more students, these education students, to add Kven, so that when they go out and finish their teaching degree and go back to a smaller village somewhere, that they can also teach Kven. We used to get, when I was there, I was for the last year, I was sort of there were 4 of us in my unit. So there were 2 of us that did Finnish and 2 of us that did Kven. 1 person did language, 1 person did culture for each. So I was the Finnish language person, and then we had a Finnish culture person, we had a Kven language person, and a Kven culture person. So I had 3 different colleagues that were all doing the same area. And at the University of Minnesota, I've always been, a team of 1, along with my TA. So it was kind of nice to have colleagues for once. But so that team, we would get, I was the kind of our sort of point person during the last year. So I would get inquiries. Anything related to Kven or Finnish would kind of come through my email, and then I would have to process it and kind of pass it on. And during last year, at some point in the fall, I got an email request we're looking for a local village in northern Tromsø. It's not too far away, a couple hours away from Tromsø. it was the principal of the school saying, we're looking for a teacher of Kven. Can you help us? We have students that want to study Kven. Can you help us? And, you know, and don't know anybody. So we didn't have anyone that we could really recommend, you know. I mean, all we can do is sort of facilitate the process of you know, disseminating the information to find people. I heard the story of a similar case in another place in northern Tromsø, where they got a teacher to come from Alaska, who was an American who had lived in northern Norway and had studied both Finnish and Kven. So like me, they got an American to come over to teach Kven. So there is a big shortage of Kven teachers, and you know, this is something that they're really trying to catch up with. And the Norwegian government is spending quite a bit of money. That money spent is controversial, of course, because some people think, well, shouldn't it be spent? I mean, like all tax money is controversial. So again, don't ever get the idea that all Norwegians agree with everything. There's people disagree with things in Norway. Maybe not to the extent that they do here, but they certainly do. So yeah, so you can take it as a subject in some schools in Tromsø and Finnmark, and the total numbers are, it's about 500 students that are taking both Finnish and Kven, and of those only 50 are taking Kven. So yeah, the government is providing all this funding, kind of looking for the teachers. So apart from the language, then there is a lot of activity that's going on with language and culture. And it just seems to me, just in the 2 years that I was there, which was a really short time, it seemed like there was more and more happening all the time. So just these are various images that kind of represent sort of the kind of cultural activities that are going on. This is the Kainuun Instituutti, or the Kvensk Institute here up in the upper left, which is sort of a center for Kven culture and language. It's about halfway between the Russian border and Tromsø, kind of in that area. There's also the Norske Kveners Forbund, Rujan Kveniliitto. It's another cultural organization. Here is Rujan Kaiku. This is the Kven newspaper. And you can see that, for example, Mitä porsanki meinaa, that's Kven, but then Hvor skal du porsanger. So it's both, there are articles there in both. You can look at this online if you just Google Rujan Kaiku. You can check it out if you know Finnish. It's kind of fun to look at because you can kind of click through and yeah, Kaiku. So it's the echo of Ruja. Ruja is the area that is this northern part of Norway, just above Finland. That's the word in Kven and Finnish that is referring to that area. And then up here, you can see NRK is the Norwegian broadcasting company on the upper right here. Kvensk Kveni, they now have Kven pages that they have on their website. So they have material that's written in Kven, and these are just some phrases that are in Kven that are sort of associated with it. Kuinka se menee, which people that know Finnish will kind of recognize that. Hyvästi, seppä poika, and then flinkki tytär. Flinkki is definitely a word from Norwegian. It means smart. And onne, hyvää päivää, for example. So these, if you know Finnish, these sound very like the Finnish you know, but they're kind of a little different. And then here is just the inside of this here, the same building here. And then in the lower right, we have the Rujan Radio, so the Kven radio show. And this is Heidi, who is the host of it. And you can see the subtitles here where she's saying, where it's written in Kven. So you can see, Isä, se on totta, mitä reklaami sanoo tästä sinun uudesta kellosta. So reklaami, if you know Finnish, you have no idea what that means. It means advertisement, because that's a loan word from Norwegian. So it's a good example of, if you know Finnish, you kind of recognize this, but if you speak Norwegian and Finnish, then you can understand a lot of Kven, really pretty much most of it. So that's an example. There's all kinds of things. I just went back in October. The last few years there has been, or September, I should say, not October. It felt like October. It was really cold. It was really cold. To this play, which is called Kyläpeli, which was also produced in North Tromsø, and it was really just an extraordinary event. If you ever find yourself in Norway, I hope they continue it. the person who organized it, you can see this is just a little picture, but there were a lot of people at the event. It started at in this small town. It started at the cultural center, and everybody basically left their cars there. And we started at the cultural center. We first had a couple of performances at the cultural center. Then they put everyone on buses, and our ultimate destination was the national park, which is at the end of the road at the top of this valley. And along the way, we did a couple stops, and these two pictures on the left are from that. These are some characters from the play that were sort of acting and kind of entertaining us and making all of us laugh. And here in the middle, this woman pouring this coffee, which was absolutely delicious, and it was so cold, it tasted good, was she walked around, and we got these really wonderful regular cups. Notice that these are not throwaway cups. That's very Norwegian. You don't throw away. You don't use single-use cups. You use regular cups, and we'll just wash them. Is what they did. They gave everyone their own real coffee cup, and then made coffee in these big, coffee pots like this on the fire, and then poured it for us. And it was just a wonderful experience. And then once we got to the top of the valley, up at the entrance to the national park, then they had this play. And the last picture here on the lower right is from that play. And it was really a wonderful sort of combination of theater and music and, Kven culture and song and dance. It was really an incredible experience. Outdoors, so it was really cool. That's why you can see all the hats that people had. It was outdoors, and it was raining. But if you know anything about Norwegian people, bad weather does not stop them at all. They have all of the gear, and you just are dressed right, and you'll sit out in 35 degrees in rain and not complain at all. That's just the Norwegian way. They don't understand when, Minnesotans complain about the winter. They're like, why are you complaining about it? You should just embrace it. So this is an example of really the vibrancy that's there in terms of the Kven cultural activity. There's much more of that than there is sort of the linguistic activity, in my opinion, I should say. And so here's an example. This is just the Tromsø City Hall. Kind of a big deal was raising the Kven flag. You can see it wasn't very windy that day, but you can see that that's the one in the middle there, Norwegian flag, kind of flanked by the Norwegian flag. But this is, local members of the Kven, local Kven organization, and here they are, sort of celebrating the raising of the Kven flag at the Tromsø City Hall. This is a really big deal symbolically when you think that these are people who were forced to change their names, were not allowed to speak their language, and then suddenly things are turned around that, like the Sami, their flag is raised right in front of the town hall. So it's really, I think people, you have to try to remember that history, and you have to remember how the people were treated, back in those days. And then part of this whole process, a big deal in Northern Norway, if you've been to Northern Norway recently and have driven around, I highly recommend it. It's really, the roads are really narrow. They can be kind of scary, but the good thing is there's not a lot of traffic. So that's a good thing about them. But there has been a lot of reclaiming of the village names. And by reclaiming, these communities where the Kven settled, the people had their own Kven or Finnish name for the village. And then, of course, that was never represented in the official Norwegian state signs for years and years and years. It was just the Norwegian name, and maybe locally people would say the name, the Kven name of the, or the Sami name of the village. But now recently there has been a lot of work. One person has a full-time job, which is in Norway, government paid job, which is to research all these place names and then to get the spelling and the form exactly right by consulting with all the historical sources and the local people to get it right, and then to get the signs put up. So this is Vadsø, which is in the far east near the Russian border. The top is in Norwegian, the middle one is in Sami, and the lower one is in Kven or Finnish. Vesisaari is the name, and then Børselv. Here we have the Kven being the second, and then we have Sami third. So it kind of depends on the sort of the makeup of the community. And here we have Alta, and then we have Sami second, and then we have Finnish third. So this has been a really big thing, and it's really wonderful to drive in Northern Norway, and you come up to a small village, and you see this sign with 3 names.
Excuse me.
Yep, go ahead.
I have a question. So you said it's Sami. Which of the Sami languages is that?
That's Northern Sami. Yeah. I should have said that. It's not just Sami, because there is no such thing as just Sami. It's Northern Sami. Yeah. So and that's important to make that case. Thanks for the question, because Northern Sami is the Sami language that is spoken in this area. But of course, there's several Sami languages, but that's the one that's spoken in Tromsø and Finnmark. So that is absolutely Northern Sami. Great question. And just about a month ago, I was just reading the Norwegian news, and I noticed, so this is very current, you can see 9 October 2020, you maybe, if you don't know Norwegian, you can't read this, but it says Tromsø Lufthavn, which is the airport, Langnes. Now, they just made the announcement that now they decided on what its name is going to be in Sami and Kven. So it's going to be Romsagirdihamman in Sami and Tromsø Lentohamina in Kven. So now this was like the national, like the map agency. They work on all these place names. They decided now that Tromsø, right now you can see in the picture, the name of it is only in Norwegian, but the idea is now that we have names in Sami and Kven, maybe the next time I go there, when I arrive, I'll see the name of the airport in all 3 languages. And, people might say, well, isn't that a lot of money, spent on all this re-signage? And it's controversial even within Norway. Yeah, but my argument would be that this is really important to restore the history of the local place, right? I mean, it's like Bedema-Kaska. We have the same story, right, in Minneapolis, right? That it's no longer Lake Calhoun, it's Bedema-Kaska. That's the original name of the lake. So it's acknowledging that history that has always been there. And I said it's a little controversial in Norway. There have been stories about local people. After the signs were put up, certain signs, they had holes through them. And so what had happened is some local residents had tried to, had shot at the signs because they didn't like the signs. And it turns out that some of the local residents, who are undoubtedly Kven and Sami themselves, don't want the Kven and Sami names up there because they are basically denying their own heritage. They're like, we are Norwegian now, we are no longer Kven and Sami. So even within Norway, it tells you how good the Norwegianization policy is, that people, deny their own heritage and completely, adopt this new identity. So anyway, that's not really the majority view, but there are definitely people that don't really, even if you would take the DNA test, they would be, maybe, Kven and Sami or Kven or Sami, but they really deny their ancestry. So, yeah, that's kind of the story. And then continued controversy. This just happened in January of this year. This ended up to be this really kind of crazy newspaper war, is really what it was. So the woman on the upper left here, she, Sanna Saroma, she is a Finn who has lived in Norway for many years. She actually lives in Southern Norway, and she is a Norwegian teacher in, I think, secondary school, so high school type. But she's a Norwegian teacher, even though she is originally from Finland. She wrote this article saying basically that why is the government spending and she's Finnish, remember that she's Finnish, and she's saying, why is the government spending all this money getting people to, students to study Kven, having the, Kven taught at the university, and develop, money on getting things printed in Kven, supporting this new written language, when, in her opinion, and this is her opinion, not mine at all, that Kven is just really sort of degraded form of Finnish that is really something like your great-grandmother would have spoken, and is not worthy of being written out, of us even paying attention to. That really what we should be doing in Norway, and she's saying this as someone who has lived in Norway for a long time, that what we should be doing is we should be focusing all of our energy. The Kven people, they can totally speak Kven, but they should write in Finnish using the Finnish standard, because by doing so, they have access to all this literature of a country of 5 million and all the media, for example. Well, she said this, basically telling the Kven people, this is what you should do. And she's an outsider, but a Finn, which is so interesting. And this started this just enormous war, And this is the small picture here is the Osavetos, who is the head of the Norsk Språkråd, which is the Norwegian kind of language board that decides all things related to the Norwegian language in Norway, who was, vehemently against Sandnesar Roma, and many, many other people were about. This just happened in January. It's very recent, not even a year. And my unit at the department, we got together. We had to respond to this because this directly was kind of directed partially, totally at us. And we wrote this article, which is on the lower right, which is utenforstående bør ikke diktere språklige valg for en etnisk minoritet, which means in English, an outsider should not dictate the language choices for an ethnic minority. That was our title. So this was really, really interesting. Boy, if you can speak Norwegian, you can go into this is the local Tromsø paper called Nordlys, which means Northern Lights. You can go in there in the archives and read all about this. And it was just, boy, she just got, she wrote this one article and it was just like boom, 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 boom. She got a few people to agree with her that were even Kven, that were like, yeah, we should be doing Finnish, but very few. And our whole point was, and this, what she says here is, she says, this headline right underneath her picture says, Kvensk is still not a language. So she is just trying to assert, that Kven is not a language. So it really got us very hot under the collar. And, everybody I knew was just like, how is this person doing this? Who is, she's not even involved in it. And how can you tell people about their own language, like how they should write it and how they should, what they should pay attention to. So it was really interesting. So I just bring this up because it's a really interesting sort of debate that is super duper current. This, even though, the whole debate about Kven being a language, really, that whole debate happened about 15 to 20 years ago and was settled. And what she's trying to do, she's, just a troublemaker, basically, is she is just trying to fan the flames and kind of get it going again. So, I mean, I can't say it any other way. She just is. Okay, so all of this said, so what's the prognosis for Kven? Well, these numbers are really tough to get a handle on, and these are just really, kind of the best estimates that people can find. There are about maybe 10,000 to 15,000 people that we think are Kven. There's probably more than that. We just don't know because a lot of people don't identify, or we don't know if they're Kven. And then among those speakers, there's maybe between 2,000 and 8,000, and that's a really big range. And it tells you something about, what does it mean to be a speaker of Kven? How much Kven do you know to be considered a speaker? That's a really difficult sort of thing. There's no, you can take some Kven in the schools, you can take Kven at the university now, but there is absolutely nobody in Norway that lives 100% of their life in Kven. That is just not possible, right? People that speak Kven, the vast majority of their lives are conducted in Norwegian. And, or Sami, for example. And then, Kven is just a very small part of it. Most speakers are quite elderly. And when I was there, I was at a couple of, several events, really. And right when I was there, I went to an event that was in October, which is in Vadsø in the Far East. And it was a Kven conference. And I was all excited. I thought, oh yeah, this is a Kven conference. And my Norwegian was okay at that point, but it wasn't like it is now, where I can, talk about all kinds of things. And so I was really much, obviously way more comfortable in Finnish. And so anytime I would meet someone at the conference that was Kven, I would try to speak Finnish with them, and they just didn't want to speak Kven with me. They would just switch over to Norwegian, and I'm like, oh, now I'm going to be struggling. So it was really hard for me, even at a Kven conference, to find people that speak Kven. Just recently, though, however, anecdotally, a friend of mine, we were doing a Zoom call, a friend of mine in Tromsø, and she had a friend over who was Kven, and so I had never met before, and I talked to her, and I'm like, wow, you really speak Kven? And she's probably maybe 60 years old, and I'm like, wow, you're one of the people that really speaks Kven. And she was really quite good. We talked, I spoke Finnish and she spoke Kven, and we could understand each other really well. So there are people out there. So what are they also trying to do right now is they're trying to do language nests. And if you've never heard the term language nest, language nest is a term that was started in New Zealand among the Maori. And the Maori started this idea because in New Zealand, of course, the native population was Maori, and then people came, you know, primarily from Britain and Ireland into New Zealand. And so the language nests are a concept developed in New Zealand that has now spread to Hawaii and all across the world. Hawaii is a big place for language nests also, where you have young kids who don't speak the language in, you know, really young age, like the age of the kids in the picture, so daycare kind of young kids, preschool. And then you have typically in a typical language nest, you would have elderly speakers who are native speakers. And you have those elderly speakers just speaking the language to the kids in this immersion environment. And in this immersion environment, the kids just pick it up. They don't have to be taught formally the way that we have to teach, you know, Finnish at the university to adults, because you just, you know, to kids, the way they acquire their native language is it's not through a book. You just talk to them and they figure it out. I'm always amazed by my, you know, neighbors next door. They have little kids, 3 and 5, and how much English they know at the age of 3. It's just astonishing, right? And how they learn it, just mom and dad spoke and the brothers and sisters spoke English to them. So this language nest is a way to sort of replicate that, but in a second language environment. So there are 3 daycare centers in Porsanger, which is kind of in that area, which is kind of the middle part of where I showed you the 3 green areas. And so they're really trying to do these different kinds of ways of getting, you know, really young kids starting out, you know, using Kven. And on the right there is a book that was a kid's book that's just an example of a kid's book that's written in Kven. And really, you know, any kind of language revitalization anywhere in the world is really dependent on the youth, because, you know, the minute that children stop speaking it, and it's something that only older people speak, it's just a matter of time. If young people don't speak it, the older people will at some point die out, and the language will go with it. And that has happened to many, many languages the world over. So what's going on really now in Northern Norway is this sort of attempt. Unfortunately, you know, it would have been great if this had happened 50 years ago, when they would have had a much larger community of speakers, and, you know, it could have, you know, had a better chance. I don't really know what the prognosis is. It's tough is all I could say. When you are down to that few speakers, it's not like you can go to villages where everybody speaks Kven, or you can walk down the street and everybody is speaking Kven. It's not like that. It's not like that. You'd have to knock on the door of someone's house, go inside, sit down at the kitchen table, and then talk to them, or go to maybe an old folks home and find, you know, a group of people that were speaking Kven. It's just not something you encounter. And when you think about language, we all think about how much English we have in our daily lives, right? It's from the minute we wake up until the minute we go to bed, right? The people we live with, we speak English with. You turn on the radio, you know, it's English. You watch TV, it's English. You go to work, you go to the grocery store, English is around us all the time. We are completely, our language is reinforced 100% of the time. And then people are in this situation where they are surrounded by Norwegian and they're trying to get these little attempts to get Kven. It's just pretty tough when you're not getting the amount of time that is the amount of contact with the language that you would have. You know, you go to Finland and Norway and you're going to learn Finnish and Norwegian if you work there and engage in society, because that's what everybody speaks. You know, if you don't learn, it's because you are living in your little bubble and you're not engaging with the rest of society. But there is no such society like that for the Kven, unfortunately. They're trying to create it in different ways. The cultural things, I should say, for example, the play that I went to, the one that was up at the entrance to the national park, had very little Kven in it. There was a lot of Kven culture, but in terms of Kven language, there was very little. There were just a few things here and there, and I perked up every time I heard it, of course. But I wouldn't say, I'm a real language person, of course. You know, I think language is, you know, I think people should start with the language, and then the culture will come with it, you know, rather than starting with the culture. I always just think that that's where you should start, because the language is the key to the culture, right? I always say to my students, you learn this language, suddenly you can read all of these books in the original that were written in a completely different language. You can turn on the TV and understand what people are saying that no other American can do. You can eavesdrop on people on the bus and understand what they're saying. You have suddenly special access into this whole culture. And yeah, that's something that, you know, for the Kven is just a really different sort of story. So on that note, I will say thank you all for your attention, as they say in Norwegian. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I believe there are some questions in the chat.
Oh, okay. I didn't have the chat open there, so let's see. Okay, so Barb said, the people who speak Scots consider it a language, but the English think of it as dialect. Well, exactly. Yeah, not the same as, yeah, so Scots as a language, absolutely, right? So this whole question of language and dialect is a really tricky one. As teaching Kven to Kven students like teaching English to Americans is considered a foreign language? Well, so Kven students, I would say, Jean, your question about teaching Kven to Kven students, there is really nobody that is brought up with Kven nowadays. And I just pause after I say that, because I know one person who it was, she studied, she's Norwegian, her mom is from Finland. So she's kind of got a dual identity, Finnish and Norwegian, but she's really interested in Kven. She took Kven at the university, at UIT. And then now she is teaching her child. She is speaking Kven to her child. So she's kind of doing an experiment. You know, her husband speaks Norwegian and she speaks Kven, not Finnish, but Kven to her child. So she is trying to raise her child speaking Kven. But I don't, boy, it would be a wonderful study to do to see if there are any children that are being brought up in just a normal, you know, like find some small town and see other children that are being brought up with, you know, having Kven spoken to them. I don't think so. So when you're teaching Kven to Kven students, these are people that are, it's like teaching Finnish to Finnish Americans. It's people with a strong sense of Finnish identity and Finnish culture, and know some of the language, maybe have some words and remember words that are spoken in the family, so they have that kind of association. That's what it's like, is teaching it to those people. I found it very, very interesting when I was there. A lot of Europeans don't get Americans and Americans' interest in their roots and their, you know, their heritage. Like, people are like, you guys are all just Americans. Why do you care about where you came from? And Europeans will say this to me, and I think, you don't understand this fundamental thing about American culture, which is all of us are really, not all of us, but many of us are interested in, because that ancestry for many people is not very long ago. You know, it's not very much for me to reach back, and my grandparents, all of whom I knew, you know, 3 of them had parents that were born in Finland, right? So that's just one generation behind. And I was only 8 years away from meeting one of them. That's how close it was. I was just born 8 years after. So I can almost touch Finland like that. And Europeans do not understand that. However, the Kven understand it, because they have had a really similar experience living in Northern Norway as descendants of people who came to Norway, who have a different culture, who have a different identity, and are now in search of their roots. So the parallels between like Finnish Americans and Kven, Norwegian Kven, are so similar. And it was like, oh yes, these people understand really what Finnish Americans are interested in, because they are doing the same. You saw some of the activities that I showed you, you know, the plays and the music and that type of thing. Those are the same types of things that you see Finnish American people doing. So it's really nice, actually, for me. Oh, so Jean says, why should languages be preserved? Okay. I have a friend who you might know, so I won't say his name. He is someone that is known to people in the Finnish community. And he said this to me a few years ago. He said, oh, you know, shouldn't everyone just speak English? Wouldn't it be just easier if everyone spoke English? And, you know, the world, we wouldn't have to spend all this money on translation. There would be no, you know, confusion or anything like that. And yeah, of course, right? It would be easier if everybody would speak English, and, you know, everyone can communicate perfectly. And there was, you know, we didn't have to spend all this time learning another language, all this money invested, all the translation. But it's the question about should languages be preserved is exactly the same kind of question. Should different species be preserved, right? Should we spend money preserving, you know, different, you know, for endangered species? It's the exact same thing. It's a question of diversity, and it's also a question of culture. So when you lose the language, you don't necessarily lose the culture, but you often do just completely. Like members of my own family, sad to say, who grew up with me have this sort of mild association with Finland and Finnish, but nothing like mine, right? And then their kids, hardly at all. They're just like, yeah, yeah, the name is Finnish, yeah, you know, but not a desire to go there. So it doesn't take that long. If the language was preserved, right, that would be preserved. And the interesting thing about the languages be preserved in general is that language and culture go hand in hand, right? And language is identity, right? And there is so much that is tied together. Suddenly, if all these languages go away, you suddenly don't have access to, you know, how would we, you know, there's all this art, all this literature that is preserved, you know, produced in all these languages. The reason that I'm interested in all these languages is that, you know, it's the access into a different worldview, right? You can study a language in English. You could study Finland for 30 years in English, but you are never going to understand it to the same way that you do if you, you know, if you speak Finnish. If you speak Finnish, you have a completely different appreciation and understanding of that culture that just you cannot even get close to attaining, you know. It's just not the same. That's what I think is the beauty of learning a language, is the access to this culture and to this different way of thinking and this different way of experiencing the world. And that's what the world is all about, is not everyone being the same. Instead, it's the diversity. So that's my passionate answer to that. Yeah, well, the Kven being considered pejorative to some, I think it's just the, so Christina had that question. It's just because, you know, the Kven were, interestingly, the Kven were considered really hard workers in Northern Norway. So they were really, you know, Finns, as you probably know, have a really, you know, Finnish Americans were known for having really strong work ethics, and so were the Kven. They were known for being really reliable and really trustworthy and really hard workers. But that said, Norwegians were always considered better, right? Because it was their country. So Kven was a way, even though it was just, it's saying like the other, right? So people maybe didn't want to be called that because they thought it was something not as good. And again, the pejorative thing, you know, there's these pejorative terms, people turn them around, and you take the pejorative term and they make it a positive association, right? This happens all the time by people inside the group. Yes, okay, Urho asked, just to clarify, are all Kvens of Finnish ancestry, or no, so Swedish, the people that, you know, that Northern Sweden, right, there are a lot of Finnish speaking, or meänkieli, which is the language that is spoken in Northern Sweden. So if you've ever heard of meänkieli, it's, I will write it here in the chat. So it's meänkieli, which is the, it's like Kven spoken in Sweden. So it's the variety. It's considered a language now too in, well, again, that's a debatable thing, but it's a language that's spoken in Northern Sweden that has been influenced by Swedish. And it's very similar to Kven in terms of its history. It's Finnish that was brought there and has been there for a really long time, especially in Sweden. And the Kvens, a lot of them came from the Tornio River Valley. And so they could have come from either side. And if you know anything about the history of the Tornio River Valley, which is the border between Sweden and Finland, then that border used to be very permeable. People would just move across it all the time. I mean, my great-grandmother was born on the Swedish side, but her parents were from the Finnish side. So they just at one point just decided to move over to the Swedish side, you know, and it's, you know, you can see the river is like the Mississippi River, you know, it's like right there. So they could have definitely been, you know, Swedish or a mixture of Swedish and Finnish, you know, ethnically. And the question is, what does Swedish mean, right? I don't know. Okay, one more question, Barb. My mother would have been punished for speaking Finnish to her siblings and friends at the two rooms where all the students' parents were Finnish immigrants. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, isn't it interesting, Barb, that you said that my mother would have been punished for speaking Finnish to her siblings and friends at their two-room school in Aberus where all the students' parents were Finnish immigrants. Isn't it amazing how that's what I mean about these policies? They become, you know, they become successful when the people that are the subjects of them, you know, start to agree with it. That's just really sad. That's called a really successful sort of, you know, assimilation policy. And, you know, anyone that is, you know, against people speaking their own language. You know, there have been these recent things in the Twin Cities area. There was a case of, I may have heard the woman who I think was speaking Somali in a restaurant and got hit on the head. You probably heard that. You know, I mean, what, you can't speak another language in Minnesota at a anywhere? I go out of my way to speak other languages in public because, you know, my 97-year-old aunt is very quick to remind everybody. She grew up on Glenwood Avenue in Minneapolis. She said when she grew up on Glenwood Avenue in Minneapolis, she was born in 1923. She said it was commonplace. You'd walk down the street, it'd be Polish, it'd be Finnish, it'd be Swedish. She goes, that was commonplace. She goes, it's unusual where now most everyone speaks English. It used to be really common to hear all kinds of languages all the time, and that was considered completely normal. So this whole idea of homogeneity and everyone must speak English is completely a modern concept and really kind of crazy. And if you look at anything with the demographics of the United States, it's not going to stay that way too, right? Spanish is really increasing. And I think that is fantastic. You know, I can't wait. I hope I live for another 100 years so I can see that we have a bilingual country. I think that would be so great. And, or trilingual, English, Spanish, and Finnish. Because when I get my students to start raising their children speaking Finnish, then I know. I do have one student who raised his 2 daughters speaking Finnish, seriously. So yeah, so the Katya asked, Finnish Romas are just rediscovering their language, even if they kept their cultural attire customs. Yeah, it's true. So the interesting thing about the Roma in Finland is that they, you know, kind of like Jewish people, right? They really kept their culture, right? You know, certain groups don't assimilate as easily for all kinds of reasons, right? And it sometimes, you know, religion can be a dividing thing. Also, just physical appearance can be a dividing thing, right? If you are an ethnic group within a larger society that can't pass, quote unquote, pass, right? The Finns could kind of pass in Norway, right? Because they, you know, maybe fair or kind of looked sort of Norwegian-like, so it was easier. But for other groups of people, you can't just pass that way. And but it's true that the Roma are also they're also Roma in Norway too. That's one of another official minority language. Okay, so last comment. My favorite books is they have a word for it. It consists of words in other languages for which there is no English equivalent. Yeah, so getting back, I like that question. So one of the things about learning another language is, you know, you get to see the world in a different way, and you have these concepts that seem to be so natural in another language, which are not. So a really good verb in Finnish is jaksaa, which means, I have no idea how to say it in English. It means basically to have the energy to, but it's one of these words that works so great in Finnish. You're like, oh, en mä jaksa. I just don't have the strength. I'm tired. I don't feel like it. But it's kind of all of those things wrapped up. And we know sisu is a word like that, right? That is a word that can't be translated. But you know, those concepts are to Finnish people just such a central thing, and they're also kind of cultural too. Especially sisu is a very cultural thing. So you can't just say, oh, sisu is intestinal fortitude. That's just not it's not a sequence of 2 words that we would say very often in English, right? With the same sort of effect. So that's one of the, you know, the beauties of learning another language is realizing all those. It's like a whole world that opens up. Yeah. So I think those are all the questions in the chat. If anybody has any other, feel free to ask if you want to. So, Anna, look at your baby. Oh my God. I was like, that's Anna. Wow, that's so cool. Oh, they went away.
You did. Nice to hear you.
Oh, there they are. Okay, there you are. Yeah. Oh my gosh, look at that. Now, are you speaking Finnish to your kid?
Little bits. I have to do more.
You should. Yeah,
She's
go to Suomikoulu.
Yeah. So I might as well get in there early.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Iso IT. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What's that?
My husband tries too.
Oh, good. Well, we have Finnish classes, and now they're offered on Zoom. So, tervetuloa.
Hey.
Yeah. And we don't know how long we'll be doing it next semester at least. And this sort of Zoom environment is probably something that we'll be keeping for the future too. We'll probably do, even when we go back to face-to-face, we'll probably be doing, continuing the remote element, because awesome. it allows a lot more people to participate. Awesome. So yeah.
I have one question for you.
Sure.
So in Norway, in the elementary schools, how many languages are the children being exposed to? Probably not Kven, but
No.
Norwegian.
English, of course. Yeah, and maybe another language. Yeah. You know, yeah, I don't know exactly how many. I'm not so familiar. I'm more familiar with the Finnish system. You know, the Finnish, the Finns study a lot of different languages. So the Norwegians, you know, they're Norwegians are very good in English, just like Finnish people are. That's really the main language, right? That people sort of focus on.
They start English in elementary school,
Yeah.
and then they might pick up another language if they go on, you know. And of course, the Norwegian
Later.
education system is different than the American system. They have a split in their schooling at 8th grade, after 8th grade. So they're going to gymnasium if they're college bound, but they might be going to more of a trade school or a career school.
And that's Finland too. Yeah, the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but they don't have as many people that go on to higher education in Norway as in Finland, though.
No.
So,
Yeah.
so not everybody is going to take that third language. They used to do German in the elementary, and then they switched to English.
Yeah. Yeah.
But probably around my age kids, you know, because my cousins were doing English.
Oh yeah. Yeah, English is a really dominant language in Norway. And,
well, and it's so easy to learn English if you speak Norwegian and vice versa, because we have so much, there was so much Norwegian and Danish influence on English.
For sure.
Our grammars are, you know, it's like falling off a log to learn a fair amount of Norwegian if you speak English.
Yeah, it's easier for them to learn English. And that's because of the exposure in the media.
Oh yeah, the TV. I mean, they have tons
TV,
of
movies, music,
English,
music. You know, you can't not learn English.
Yeah.
If you watch TV or go to the movies, you know, if you don't, then you wouldn't learn it. But yeah, but they have the advantage, right? Because we don't just turn on the TV or, you know, go to the movies and find Finnish films all the time. I wish we did. Now at least we have Netflix, so we can find some Finnish content, and you know, you can find whatever you want online if you just look enough. But yeah, it's not like it's not surrounding you all the time. Yeah. So, all right. Well, it's fun to see all these people here. I'm like, hello, hello, hello. All these different people. I'm like, hello, hello. I want to like say hello to everybody that I know. But anyway, nice to see everybody, and thanks for the interest. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing about the Kven. It's if you ever go to that area of Norway, you know, it's kind of hard to experience Kven culture, I guess. You would have to kind of know about events going on. It just, when you're there, it would just seem very Norwegian. But getting back to the whole English thing, Northern Norway is very Norwegian in the sense of, I mean, it's also Sami and Kven, but it's definitely a place where I had no problem getting people to speak Norwegian to me. People preferred Norwegian over English. If they once they heard that I could speak some Norwegian, they were like, "Oh, thank God, we don't have to speak English." So, whereas not the case in Southern Norway. So the Northern Norwegians are definitely, they're like, Norwegian, let's just speak Norwegian. It's easier for us. So it's kind of nice learning the language to be up there.
You haven't addressed the 2 or more Norwegians too.
What's that?
Well, you know, on the West Coast.
Oh,
I have a terrible time understanding Norwegian because my grandmother was from Eidsvoll.
Yeah.
Which to the rest of the country is Eidsvoll. You know, I speak Eidsvolling, and I have a hard time on the West Coast because the dialect is so different.
Well, Norwegian dialects, learning Norwegian, the big challenge is, like Barb was saying, it's very similar. I mean, it's a related language to English, so it's you know, much easier than an English speaker learning Finnish, but there's so many different dialects, and people really speak their dialects in Norway. So when they're on TV, you will find people that you're thinking, is that the same language? Because they don't at all even sound alike. And, you know, some of the dialects, even for the Norwegians, they're like, what is that? It's not that big of a country, but because of the geography, you know, the dialects are very, very, very different. And people are very proud nowadays of their dialects, and they retain. People, when they move, they do not change their dialect. You could live in another place for many years. You do not, it would seem false people from the southern U.S. will move north and change their dialect. People from Georgia or Alabama, Norwegians do not do that. They keep their language and they don't change it. So anyway,
when I studied Norwegian at the U, and this is in 1975 or so, the instructor asked me where I had learned, what I knew. It was like, please, that's okay, but please don't contaminate the rest of the class.
yeah, and I speak Tromsø dialect now, and that's the only one I speak. I don't speak the standard anymore. Yeah. Any final questions Christina's asking? Otherwise, we should let everyone continue with the rest of their night. And thanks for your attention. And feel free, if you have questions after this, feel free to reach out to me. My email is haataja@umn.edu. I got a new email address. It's so great. Like my old one was Karvonen@umn.edu. My new one is just Haataja. My last name. I just took the name and I took the email address at the U of M. So it's super easy to remember. Anyway, have a